Okay, so we should get started. Welcome back today, everybody, and I think more people will be coming in the next few minutes, as is typical for online stuff. Today, we're going to talk about Toyota Production System, and the subtopics are destroying preconceptions, creativity and Kaizen. Talk a little bit about moonshine, and what the goal is, of course, just in time and of continuous flow as best as one can make it of material and information. And of course, this is not so much an item of interest in lean world, hasn't been an item of interest for many years. That along with Kaizen is just kind of, people forget about that. And unfortunately, this is really the foundation of what we should be looking to achieve. So Bruno, we have some, of course, people from Brazil. If you'd like to say a few words in Portuguese before we get started.
Ok. Bom, pessoal, sejam muito bem-vindos aí ao nosso terceiro bate-papo. Agora aí estamos na reta final e o assunto vai ser basicamente aí um quase fechamento, já que esse tema não tem exatamente um final. Estou muito feliz aqui de estar com vocês mais uma vez. Obrigado aí pela presença nos anteriores. Obrigado aí para quem vai assistir também depois das gravações. E, como o Bob comentou aí, os temas de hoje vão ser aí. Primeiro, destruir alguns preconceitos em relação à ideia de Kaizen, do sistema Toyota de produção no geral. Depois a gente vai bater um papo aí, uma extensão do papo do segundo encontro, né? Em relação à criatividade dentro do Kaizen e sobre o conceito de moonshining. E, no final, relembrar vocês aí de, um, de uma grande meta que ficou esquecida aí, que fica realmente para trás quando a gente fala desse tema, que é o just in time. Então a gente vai começar aí a seguir essa linha de raciocínio para fechar essa série aí de três encontros. Então aproveitem bastante aí, depois lá no canal da Kaizen Lab vai ter a versão legendada certinho ali em português, tá bom? Ok?
Okay, we're ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yeah, okay. So what we talk about today to start off is this idea of you need to destroy your preconception. Of course, the world runs on classical management and batch and queue processing, and some of that is changing, of course, because of the digital world and being able to process information much more quickly and some companies are organizing the supply of goods and services to companies that are enabled by that technology without really going down the path of Kaizen and just in time. It's really a technological solution to satisfying a customer more quickly. But this whole thing revolving around Toyota Production System really relates to destroying your preconceptions because if you're used to seeing things a certain way and understanding things a certain way, TPS does not make a lot of sense to people. It's truly a great management innovation. And unfortunately, and I've written about this extensively, that economists, don't seem to think that there's anything special about Toyota Production System. They just their perspective is the marketplace will determine the winner or loser in a company, and the management system really has nothing to do with it. And that's, of course, a very narrow view, and it's rooted in a preconception of the, a supernatural preconception of the magic of the marketplace, and that'll just work out whatever problem happens to exist. So it's really a supernatural belief rather than paying attention to the facts and the science behind it. And of course, we know CEOs ignore this and they somehow smell a rat. They think it's going to be a little bit, too difficult and unnecessary and disruptive and so on. And then, of course, we have our professors who teach, let's talk principally about business schools. It's a little bit different, perhaps in engineering schools, but at least in business schools, this is not too much of it's not a topic that's regularly discussed. Many business schools in the US, even 20 years ago or so, maybe, no, it'd be 25 now, they dropped operations management courses from the curriculum in favor of strategy and more finance courses. And so what little operations, the money making activity of a company, what little operations was discussed in an MBA curriculum got dropped, and that would have typically been the place where folks would have talked about TPS or lean or some type of progressive management. And so it's not a happy situation at all in terms of getting the word out. And so here we all are trying to do that, but I think we're mostly ignored by economists, CEOs, and professors. And of course, they're stuck in their preconceptions about what business is and how it should operate and so forth. And what we find, of course, is that leadership is mostly the same everywhere. There are some differences and so forth, but the question is, why is it mostly the same? Why do most leaders reject progressive management? And pretty much, throughout history, going back hundreds of years and much longer than that. There's also massive amounts of money spent on leadership training. And much of this leadership training is pragmatic. And really what pragmatic means, people think pragmatic means practical, but it's actually a formulation that's rooted in preconceptions that help perpetuate the status quo way of thinking and doing things. So you need to think about pragmatism more in the sense of when we think something is pragmatic, it's informed by pre-existing preconceptions. And that's why we have all this training that people spend a lot of money for leadership training, and it's not very effective. And then, of course, the training is focused on behaviors, which I'll talk about in a moment. I mean, it's always focused on behaviors. This started in the early 1900s with a couple of books were written by some guys when they first started to explore the topic of leadership and why some leaders were more effective than others. And it, zeroed in on the obvious, what's visible, what's above the waterline is the behaviors, but they didn't drill down deeper to see what's going on. And then we have a situation where a lot of leaders are essentially indifferent for improving leadership. As I've noted in one of my books, Speed Leadership, that there's tons of errors made by leaders, whether they're first day of supervisory experience or 30 years of CEO experience. There's the same and similar types of errors made by both people. And then you can imagine in a big company, you have managers at all levels, and in large companies, so you have lots of managers making lots of the similar kinds of mistakes. So we have a serious problem here with respect to leadership and how to improve leadership and getting the attention of people that there's better ways of leading and so on. So we have, wonderful invention, innovation of Toyota Production System, built on the work of some others earlier, but obviously, Toyota people made fantastic and innovative contributions on their own to create something that was truly remarkable. So let me share with you a couple of slides about preconceptions, and we'll proceed from there. Does anybody have any questions before we start, or you'd like to say anything? By the way, welcome to David Fitzpatrick. He's coming to us from Japan. So I think David is there at midnight or something like that. It's very late in the evening.
Before that.
Yeah, okay. So
good to see you, Bob. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, likewise. So yes, it's very late in the day for David. So my understanding, he often does this because
Yeah.
because he has to for his work.
Don't worry, I won't fall asleep. I'm all ears.
Okay. So you can bug out anytime if you need to. So you should be seeing a slide that shows leaders' behaviors above the waterline. Is that what you're seeing? And this is the observations that people have clearly are when you interact with other people, the most noticeable thing is the behaviors that people have. But you have to dig further, go below the surface level, just to what you cannot see to really understand what's going on. And so below that, we have people's beliefs, and then below that, we have their preconceptions, and these preconceptions are informed by traditions, things that have long been in place. And people generally have the attitude that if it's something is done this way, a certain way, or if people think about things a certain way, that it is tried and true. that it has been worked out over a long period of time, so it must be the right way to think and must be the right way to do things. And people rarely challenge um, the preconceptions that inform those ways of thinking and doing things. Instead, the people who do challenge those preconceptions pretty much get waved off. It's like, oh, these are just, outlier people, and that, don't pay any attention to them. They don't know what they're talking about. You can just ignore it. And so the majority of folks in leadership positions just tend to, um, ignore what the people who are trying to challenge preconceptions. And of course, you'll notice that if you've read the book Just in Time for Today and Tomorrow, on page 12, Taiichi Ohno said, "We are doomed to failure if we do not initiate a daily destruction of our various preconceptions." And Taiichi Ohno was speaking about that in the sense of, business and manufacturing, or probably more particularly economics and manufacturing. And that, by the way, I recently received a copy of the Japanese version of that book, Just in Time for Today and Tomorrow. And it has a very long title, something like, "Why Not Provide What's Needed When It's Needed in the Amount Needed?" And David Fitzpatrick, who is fluent in Japanese, and I asked him if he would help translate that passage, because I wanted to verify that this English version from the book Just in Time for Today and Tomorrow from 1988 was accurate in terms of the 1986 Japanese version. And the two translations are different, and they say some slightly different things. Going from Japanese to English through David Fitzpatrick talks about creative destruction in the workplace, which refers to Kaizen, but it also refers to having a fresh mindset every day, which is basically challenging your preconceptions. So the words aren't exactly the same, but the idea is very similar. And you can see below, preconception is a preconceived opinion or idea that is formed prior to experience and in the absence of reasoning. So this is something that can come to us very early in our lives. And, the minute we're born, we have managers. Those managers are called our parents. And pretty soon we experience other managers, which would be, maybe we go to the doctor as a young child, and there's a manager for our health. We go to the dentist, there's a manager for our teeth. We go to school, there's a manager for our education. We play sports, and there's a coach, so there's a manager for that. And so very early on, these people tell you things that you have no reason to doubt them. They're authority figures. You don't experience these things directly. They tell you things, and you say, "Yeah, okay, that seems to make sense." And so we'll just follow that. And then we get into higher levels of education, or we go to work, and the boss says, do things this way or that way. And we say, well, that, doesn't seem quite right to me, but people have been doing this work for a long time. So, it must be a pretty good way of doing it. Maybe I just don't understand it. Maybe I'm the problem, not the work, but I'm the problem. I don't understand it. So these are very important things that stand in the way of making progress. And of course, we have people in business, employees, workers are very frustrated. They get yelled at for problems and so on. And a lot of it has to do with all the problems related to batch and queue material and information flow, or excuse me, information processing, batch and queue material and information processing, which is a very blame-oriented environment. And of course, a business is an economic hierarchy. So there's a structure and things flow from the top down and so on. And so we just have these scores of preconceptions that we have to contend with. And we want to describe it to you just with this diagram on the right. And I've written about it in the book on the left. And I highlighted emerging leaders because I felt like the leaders that have been around a long time, they're not going to change. They're not going to think any differently. They're not going to challenge their preconceptions. And the reason why is shown on the right. What you see are the different categories of preconceptions: economic, social, political, historical, and then on the other end, spiritual, aesthetic, and technological. An example of a technological preconception that's been the case since the Industrial Revolution is, you buy machines to replace people because people are problems, and machines are going to do the work better, and so on. And the aesthetic preconceptions relate to just how leaders like things to look a certain way, hierarchically, for example. And so each one of these categories has 12 to 15 preconceptions associated with them, for a total of maybe 150. And so when an employee, let's say a company doesn't know anything about a progressive management or lean or TPS or whatever, and the employee wants to give a presentation to the boss and say, we should do this progressive management stuff, and gives in the presentation, says it's better quality, it's better employee engagement, it's shorter lead time, it's lower cost. You've only addressed a few things out of many that would be of concern to somebody in a top leadership position. And so the boss will typically say, I'm not convinced, forget about it. Or they'll say, yeah, it's okay to use some of these tools, to improve productivity and reduce costs, but not interested in lean transformation or any kind of business transformation to progressive management. In this picture on the right, I show a bunch of pipes, and it's a closed system. It's the purpose of all the piping, to show that these preconceptions are interrelated. They don't all stand alone. One relates to another, and that it's a closed system, and it's very hard to break into that system to start to alter the preconceptions of people who think this way. And of course, the way that I think is the best way to break into this system and start to alter the preconceptions is Kaizen, and specifically Toyota style Kaizen, not Kaizen as it is often poorly understood. And then of course, this is the problem we face, is getting leaders to participate in Kaizen, because their preconception is going to be, well, I'm the CEO and I've got other things to do, and the Kaizen is for lower level people. And let's face it, the problems in this business come from the bottom of the organization, not the top. We make perfect decisions. It's people down below who can't implement it and do things correctly. So, they need Kaizen. And so if the boss allows the lower level people to engage in Kaizen, then the lower level people are going to have their preconceptions destroyed, but the people at the top won't. And so when the people at the bottom report out on Kaizen and say, these things need to change in order for, the way we measure the KPI needs to change so we can improve the flow, the bosses will say, no, we don't want to do that. And so you have this big gap in understanding that starts to form between people at the bottom who participated in Kaizen and the people at the top who have not. So anyway, so we have this kind of very difficult situation, and we all try to overcome it. So the focus of training historically has been teach, explain, demonstrate different behaviors that will result in different leadership competencies. And so the way to improve leadership is to focus on the behaviors. And there is something called competency models, which industrial psychologists developed in the 1990s. And the basis, if you look at books and so forth about competency models, you will never see the word beliefs in there, and you will never see the word preconceptions. But you will see a lot of words in the index related to behaviors. And so the foundation for what's called competency models for senior leadership, to get them to develop and improve their leadership, starts with behaviors. We really have to peel back the onion a bit and look at the beliefs, and then peel that further back into the preconceptions. And if you want different competencies, you start with Kaizen to start to change those preconceptions, which then changes the beliefs, the behaviors, to get to the new competencies. So this is the kind of thing that needs to happen, and that has happened or continues to happen in Toyota, because they all say things like, the workplace must change every day. In traditionally managed companies, leaders don't say the workplace must change every day. And by change, they mean there must be Kaizen activity every day to improve the workplace, because there's waste that's visible and invisible, and you have to look for that and eliminate that. Most leaders like the stability in the workplace, things not to change every day. So there's just this whole bunch of preconceptions that help prevent progressive management from moving forward. So I'm going to stop that share and ask if you have any questions or comments about that. If not, we can move on to the next step, which is Bruno's going to talk a little bit about creativity and Kaizen and moonshine.
Okay, let's go. It's kind of funny to see how sometimes leadership tries to disregard the connection between human nature and business. Like business is something like a machine, a mechanical machine, and an electromechanical machine. But in reality, we are some kind of a small social circle, regardless of a small society inside of a company. So we are trying to apply rules that works for machines into people, and that never works in a very healthy way for much longer. So Kaizen comes as kinda of an alternative that seeks to benefit the human nature and also create profit. There is a researcher, a neuroscientist called Jack Panksepp. Let me share my screen with you guys. Let's see, where is it? Okay, just fine. He may be not very famous, very famous person among us professionals of engineering and of continuous improvement, but his research is very extensive, and he connects exactly with what Bob presented to us about the behavior is basically the surface, is basically what we see as a result of a much deeper process. And another curious thing is that preconceptions are kind of shortcuts. We use preconceptions as a way of surviving because it cuts corners, it protects us, it makes things stable, and our brain is basic a machine with a very cautious use of the word that seeks for patterns. Seeks patterns. We like to find patterns in things because patterns makes us secure. Patterns gives us certainty, and certainty means survival. So the greatest difference between the uncertainty we have inside Kaizen is that is in a controlled environment. You have the safety that you have kind of a safety net of your managers and of the company. That's not just a commercial relationship between your position inside the company and all you have to offer and what the company can offer you as a return or a return for that. So Panksepp says that we share with the mammals basically 7 basic emotions, and they kind of work like Bob said about the preconceptions in kind of a closed circuit. They interact with each other. But Kaizen really calls my attention because of this basic emotional need, this primal emotion, as Jack puts, that is the seeking. We all have natural curiosity. We like to create things. We like to make small repairs at our home. And as we seen in the last meeting, every hobby, as Bob said, every hobby kinda involves creating something with our own hands, doing something, seeing something take shape from our ideas, and to be proud of that is something that is natural for us human beings. And Kaizen goes very well along with this need. We have the need to seek, to explore new things, to explore new places, and we can connect that also with the need for survival. If we can find better solutions for the problems we have, we can improve our chances to keep the species going. So this is a relationship that I feel that is not very well explored. And as beliefs are cutting corners for us to survive, we acquire beliefs not just by the word of others, but also through our experience. We need to take care of the both fronts. We need to use our words to try to convince people that things can be different, that they can try new things, but also involve them in the field, in the gamba, and so they can experience the satisfaction of this emotional needs. And Kaizen involves the concept of moonshining, created by Nakao Sensei, someone that I don't know personally, but I'm very fond of already. And this concept is based on the idea that we can use materials that we already have, can reuse things we already have to bypass some of restrictions, some difficulty, and the idea comes from when we had the prohibition law in the United States, where folks were surviving in an era of controlled alcohol production, liquor production, and so they started to find a way to bypass that, to produce their own beverages at home with the ingredients they had, and so comes the concept of moonshining. And folks are usually very, very worried about the aesthetic of the improvements, the appearance of improvement. If you are using the latest technology, if you are on par with market trends, if we are using the latest software and everything around that. But Kaizen is all about prototyping your ideas until you find the ideal state. It doesn't work based on the idea of wasting too much time trying fancy stuff, but to learn as we go, to learn as we try. And you guys can see that this has a very, very, very close connection to the idea of the emotional need of seeking. So we can act again as childs somehow. We can put our brain to work into fun things. It's kind of a reconciliation between the madness that is the adult life at work and our very human nature that is to play, to create stuff, to have fun, and all things that gets buried under the need to generate profit. And while folks try to control us through a spreadsheet, they ignore the fact by not exploring the real world that when we are creative, when we are kind of acting like in a healthy way, like kids, we can produce more profit. And with the plus that we'll be happy, we'll be finding satisfaction inside that thing that takes most of our time during the day, that is work. And I also like to share to you guys something that I think you know very well about this. See, you guys can see my screen, I believe so. It's Farm. Some folks in Brazil don't know this by this name, but Kaizen is all about prototyping, putting creativity to work, and you can do that. I really believe that Farm is it's kind of sophisticated for some things that we can try in our daily lives, but we go through many restrictions daily, and management trying to make us go with fancy solutions, and I would say Farm is kind of Lego for us engineers to try things at Kaizen, so we can do things with our own hands. And that makes me remember something about moonshining and Kaizen. It's about a video that is, I can't remember right now, YouTube channel's name, but I believe it's Toyota Times. It's an official channel from Toyota, and that has a very light manner and a very funny manner to show a little bit of things that happens in the backstages and also in the daily lives of Toyota consultants and Toyota workers and all the suppliers in their chain. And there's one episode of Toyota Times that's I believe is my favorite. They're still talking about the pandemics, and Toyota consultants are showing how they help to improve the manufacturing of clothing, adequate clothing for people to work during the pandemic, to interact in a safe way with people that could be carrying the virus. So basically, hospital apparel for folks to go to work, and they were, if I'm not mistaken, they weren't being able to attend to the demand, to keep up with the demand. And one of the processes involved the cutting of the plastic material, the plastic film they use to manufacture the clothing. And one of the solutions found by the Toyota consultants while working with the operators of that line was to use some kind of gauge to keep the film in line where they needed to cut, and to use a scissor, a simple scissor to cut a few sheets of the plastic film. And they needed a fixed place to store the scissor by the side of the machine, so folks don't need to search for the scissor to do the work and don't waste time. And they went with an empty roll of toilet paper. They created a place to store the scissor made of an empty roll of toilet paper. They just fixed that with, I believe it was tape, on the side of the machine, and they improved the production by a very big factor, using what they had without the need for being fancy. Just, we have a problem, we have a need, and we need a solution. And this thing is really important when you think about eliminating waste. A part of eliminating waste is reusing things we have, reusing things that are not for the purpose of what we are initially trying to do. But not be worried about it will be beautiful, it will be pleasing for our eyes, but it will work in a safely way, in a cheap way. And you might start to think that it's very funny, very fun to look around you and try to find solutions with the things that you have. And there's some studies from Patricia Stokes that got to the conclusion that when we have some restrictions, when we have some constraints to our solution, to our search for some solution, we tend to be creative. If everything is an option, there's no need to be creative. If everything is possible, if you don't have to choose, you don't need to be creative. There's no need. You just can throw money at the problems. So this goes very well along with the concept of moonshining. That is, you have some restrictions to the solution. You can't add resources. You can't add waste. You can't raise the quantity of the things that you are going to use. You need to be creative. These are the restrictions. This is Mr. Nakau's nose. These are the constraints that you have to work with. And when we know very well by personal experience that when we are forced to find a way around something, we take things out of nowhere, and we have fun like doing that. Let's be honest. It's very It's when it's not a life-threatening situation, but you are in kind of danger of something. You need to make something work. You don't have time to waste thinking about fancy things. And I will be honest, I think is very pleasing when you are in a situation that you can find time to think too much. But when you have to turn things upside down, he use old ideas, and I believe that we can summarize that as to take action. Creativity requires us to take action. I believe that. I believe that's a connection we can make about the human nature and human nature, and a little bit about what we talked about in the last conversation.
Yeah, if
Now
I
I
can
think
add, yeah, if I can add to that, classical management is basically antisocial. Not completely, but I mean it's less social because it splits people and money, separates people and money, and focuses on money and kind of neglect people. Uh, Progressive management is pro-social, and of course, that's meant to engage people and let's make work a little bit more fun, a lot more fun if we can, and use the process of Kaizen. But antisocial classical management, of course, is easier for leaders to do. It's much easier. And pro-social progressive management is harder for leaders to do. And so, most leaders, I mean, you have to imagine if you're in the position as a CEO and that you've spent 30 years getting to that position, to some extent, you're a little bit tired, maybe a little bit mentally burnt out, physically tired. Now you have a lot of people that report to you that you can delegate things to. So you can instead focus on your getting your big boat built or buying some houses and getting them renovated and stuff like that. Uh, but so you can imagine that if you're in that position, you'd kind of want things to be easier too, right? And so part of the challenge here is for boards of directors to put into place the CEOs who still have a lot of energy, you know, and that they want to do things that are harder and not take it easy. But I think it's important to understand that if you were in those shoes, that you might be tempted to do the same thing, which is to take it easier. Um, One of the wonderful things about Kaizen is it brings craftsmanship back into business. And starting with the Industrial Revolution, craftsmanship started to go out of business. And let me share with you a slide here that describes this. It's many words, unfortunately, but I think it tells a great story that you should be aware of. And so let me find it here. This was, you should see many words. This was from a blog post that I wrote in 2016. And the blog post was titled Visceral Disdain for Lean, meaning people just really don't like it at a gut level. And part of the discussion of this was about Kaizen and craftsmanship. And for hundreds of years, there have been critics of industrialization. And one of their main points of criticism was the division of labor. So these criticism goes back 250 or more years. So the division of labor led to a drift away from craft production and the growing use of standardization and complex machinery. And that removed craft from work. It de-skilled workers. And that is a bigger concern than people realize. And then I go on to explain it here. Craft production represented work as an integral part of humanity. Life, relationships, bonds to the local community, ingenuity, a sense of worth, fulfillment, and the continuance of life. Standardization, in particular, turned noble craft work into something vulgar because of its sameness, the repetition in the work, sameness in the product, and especially because of the loss of humanity in something so fundamental to life as work. So for all of human history, so we're talking millions of years here, right? Long time, and craft production was the way things were made and spawned simple principles and mechanisms for honest trade among people. Then, only in the last 250 years, machines and industries were developed to facilitate production and new methods for conducting business transactions, which fundamentally and greatly changed the nature of work that humans had experienced, and I'm talking here in the case of Homo sapiens, experienced for tens of thousands of years. So, there's a big difference here in what's going on in terms of our development and evolutions as humans. Now, of course, we know within the Toyota production system standardization and the reason to do that for quality, and the workers participate in standardization and so on. But this was the point of criticism as became this division of labor and machinery start to get involved in production activities. So this is why people at work feel like a cog in the machine. And in classical management, you have your job, do your job, don't think, don't have suggestions for improvement, just do your job, do as the boss tells you to do, and so forth. So I'm exaggerating a little bit. It's not like that everywhere in classical management, but it's predominantly like that. And so what Kaizen does is it's bringing back something that is part of our humanity, which is craft work. And this is why people outside of the workplace have hobbies, and they like cars and car engines or motorcycles, or they like to make their own lures for fishing, or whatever they do, something relates to craft. There's many, hundreds of hobbies, and most of them relate to using your hands and making something. Some of those hobbies involve using your brain to make imagination and make images in your head, like when you're reading a book, for example, or watching a movie. So this is, fundamental part of humanity, which is brought back in. And of course, throughout humanity, how did we learn to do things? Was by trial and error. And so Kaizen is a form of trial and error, but with the idea of achieving breakthroughs, substantial improvements in productivity and performance, and making the work easier. So again, I don't think people appreciate human evolution, craft work, and in relation to business, and what Kaizen can do to bring that craftsmanship back into business. It's very powerful. The other thing to show is talk a little bit more about moonshine here. Let's get to the next slide. Why isn't it moving? There we go. Anyway, get to moonshine. Here you see a couple of examples where a creeform is used. And the reason why creeform is wonderful is that it's part of the craftsmanship of Kaizen to create the fixtures and so forth that you're, in this case, building some equipment to eliminate the batching in the work, and thus to improve the flow of the work in these two examples. On the left-hand side is a little washing machine. So let me briefly explain it. A part is stamped. It's a stainless steel part that is stamped in a press. And for the stamping operation, you have to coat the part with oil. And after the stamping operation, the part goes into a heat treatment on a conveyor, so that the furnace is always on to stress relieve the part. It's a conveyor belt. It's a hot furnace using energy and so forth. And the furnace is always on. Now, previously, the parts went into a batch washing machine, 500 parts at a time. And then Nakao-san challenged the team to figure out a way to wash the parts one at a time so you can load them on the conveyor one at a time, rather than putting in 500 pieces in a batch into a washing machine, which, by the way, cost $15,000 for that washing machine to do things in batch. And again, the furnace is running, waiting for the parts to fill up in the washing machine. Then the washing machine go through the cycle, then you unload it. All of this takes time. In the meantime, you're burning all kind of energy. It's hot, spending spending money but getting no value. And so they build this little sequential washing machine. You can see up sort of the top left these little hooks. There's a little motor there. There's ultrasonic baths that it goes through, 3 of them to wash the part, or 2 of them to wash the part, and then on to straight onto the conveyor. And this was produced in the first Kaizen. They made a lot of progress in the first Kaizen, and then they continued to refine and improve the washing machine here in subsequent Kaizen. What you see on the right-hand side is the thing with the copper wheel. That's a seam welder, and they were making a part for a customer, and the seam welding machine that they had, expensive one that they had bought, didn't do a good job of seam welding. So they created their own seam welding. By the way, I should have mentioned in the left-hand image with the ultrasonic bath, this was all stuff that's laying around the shop. There was no need to buy anything there. The right-hand side, the seam welder, yeah, they had to buy a few things to make that. But what's important here is whatever they bought, the gauges and so forth that may not have been hanging around the shop, etc., these things are expensed. So the prior seam welder was capitalized because it's expensive and they have to spend a lot of money and pay taxes on that machine. With Creeform and buying small things from the industrial supply catalog, you expense it. So it's not capitalized. It doesn't show up on the books. And you see it's on wheels, so you can move it directly into the production line. Anyway, it's a seam welder, produce much better weld. What you see on the right-hand side is a mini lathe. You know, you couldn't build that yourself. They had to buy that mini lathe to face off the electrode for seam welding after so many seam welds. So what's wonderful about this stuff is, you know, it engages people in building things, but it expands the internal capability for producing machines that are customized to the needs of production. And this gives you a leg up competitively because they have a better quality seam welder than all the other companies they compete against making that kind of product, who buy the expensive seam welding machine that doesn't produce good welds. So you develop the capability internally, not just for making, you know, we think of machine as in a mechanical sense, but there's electromechanical things going on, and there's a pressure applied to this copper electrode. You can see the pressure gauges and so forth. So you have to know something about, pressurization and compressible fluid and so forth. So the team of people, and by the way, this is not all engineers doing this. This is operators contributing to the creation of these machines, who are not trained in school in electrical engineering or computers or whatever, but they're figuring it out and producing something just absolutely beautiful. So the moonshine aspect, and again, bringing craftsmanship into the Kaizen Kaizen brings craftsmanship into the workplace is hugely important, and it gives you a major competitive advantage in terms of building your own machines. And of course, they're expensed, they're not capitalized, and it develops a skill and capability in the company that machine builders have, and now you have in your manufacturing company. It's remarkable. Does anybody have any comments or questions or observations?
No catalog engineers.
Nope. Yeah, that's a no catalog engineer.
Here in
Okay.
Brazil, we used to hire engineers as analysts most of the time because the standard wage, the minimum wage for the engineers here is very high, but is kind of fair considering the profession. So companies hires them as analysts, pays half or less of the established wage for engineers, and put them behind computers to create spreadsheets and do Power BI work. And then you have folks that studied mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, all wasting their initial vocation through technological work, to field work, to be acting like support for operators, to validate their ideas, to see if the mechanical properties of what they're doing are safe and are okay, and stay behind desks wasting their time with spreadsheets. It's basically like that here.
And that's a waste of human resources. That's no good. That's just terrible. Yeah, just terrible. So let's talk a moment about just in time, and I'll share a couple of images with you. Let's see, back to share. Okay. All right, so you should see from batch to flow, it says at the top. You can make things the expensive way, which you see in this image here. It comes from the book by David Liu called Kanban Just in Time at Toyota, published in 1996 by Productivity Press. Good old Norman Bodek recently passed away. The expensive way, of course, is to have dedicated lines for producing the different vehicles shown here, as opposed to producing an assembly line based on load smoothing. And so, depending upon your volumes, you have a mixed model production. What you see on the right-hand side, of course, is what Yoshiki Iwata, you probably saw this on LinkedIn when I posted it some time ago. I guess it was in the summer, that he wrote out on paper some of the basic ideas here of just in time and the Toyota production system, but this one relates to just in time. And so as you see at the top, the concept is world-class production system, Toyota production system. 2 elements, just in time and Jidoka, automation with the human touch, separating man from machine and poka-yoke and so forth. And then he, below that, makes a distinction, and this is important because language is very important, and how things get translated from Japanese to English as leads to different thinking in people's head. And he's showing here that production smoothing is not equal to leveling. And in Lean World, we often say production leveling, but he's being careful here to say production smoothing. And it doesn't mean, when we think of leveling, we think of something that's, flat, right? But it's not flat. And so then he gives the example. If you have in a month orders for 600 units of A and 400 of B and 400 of C, he breaks it down into the weekly requirement and then into the daily requirement. And then below that, you see how it's spread out over the time period of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, down to the daily requirement, down to the hourly requirement off of 2 shifts. And then he says on the right-hand side, the technique is to produce things according to the takt time, the rate of customer demand, and make sure that the cycle time does not, is not mismatched to the takt time. In other words, not over the takt time. And then you have some notes here. Hard to read, but it says man working, handling, finger, machine. A little bit hard to read. Anyway, standard work combination sheet. Oh, I think by the way, for the notes there, man working, hand handling, finger. It's looking at all these details of how somebody is doing the work to be productive, and also to make sure that the the cycle time is less than the takt time. Then we have one-piece flow production, make things one at a time. You have a cycle here of the multi-skilled operator working in a cycle. You have to have setup reduction down from hours to minutes or less. You have a pull system. You put an X in front of the push system. You have the water spider, somebody bringing the materials to the workplace. Kanban is not equal to a card. He's trying to destroy some misunderstandings here about what Kanban is. Your store is a supermarket. And quality, preventative maintenance, 5S. Little notation says location, so you need to know where everything is. Each section, I think he's referring to go, no-go gauges for measuring as part of quality. So this is representation of what you want to do. And do you see this in Lean World? Anybody? Can you tell me? You don't see this. It just fell off the map. So as we all know, and I've been harping on LinkedIn forever, it's just, tools for the manager's toolkit within the framework of classically managed environment. But what is the reason to go from batch to flow? Why bother doing that? Here's why. You see this chart here. It shows the cost per unit based upon annual volume. And this top curve, the Maxey-Silbertson curve, was deduced, not an actual measurement here. And that's important because when you see a chart like this with numbers on the X and Y axis, you think, somebody must have actually made measurements to create this top line with the deep bend in the curve. Well, that, if you can look at my picture here, that curve came from this book called The Motor Industry, written by George Maxey and Aubrey Silberstein. This is an interesting book for a few reasons. One is, I had for years tried to find it because I had seen it referenced in some papers and elsewhere, things that I had read. But in each one of those references, it was wrongly written. The title was wrong, the author was wrong, something was wrong with it. I couldn't find it. Anyway, one day I found it, and the reason why I wanted to find it was because it had a mention, just a mention, on one page and in a footnote of flow production. And I said, that's interesting. I got to find this book. I got to read it. So I did, and I actually met with Aubrey Silbertson at the Oxford and Cambridge Club in the UK in 2011. He's since passed away. He was about 86 or 87 when I met him. And he was a huge believer in the top curve. The more you produce, the cheaper it is. And he brought with him an article from Financial Times featuring a Kia Toyota talking about mass production, And so I was trying to tell him about flow production and why we should, go to that. Anyway, so the motor industry book, this was reflected insights of the British automotive industry. It was published in 1959. And it referenced this book, Principles of Mass and Flow Production by Frank Woolard from 1954, which, of course, some of you know I republished in 2011 with other of Woolard's writings and my analysis that Toyota probably learned a lot from Frank Woolard because the market was much more similar. The British automotive market was far more similar to the Japanese automotive market than the US auto market. And but I never found the smoking gun. But the timing was that Kichiro Toyota was visiting Platt Brothers, selling the looms and so forth at the same time that Woolard was at Morris Motors and so on. And anybody could just go to Morris Motors and knock on the door and say, can you show me what you're doing? And they'd say, fine. So there's probably a connection there. Anyway, back to the Maxey-Silbertson cost curve. This reflects batch and queue production, as was being done in the British automotive industry and for a long time, but particularly starting in the early 1900s, outside of Morris Motors, in the other producers. And so what you see there is a curve that was inferred from discussions with automotive executives. It is not actually a curve created by, tracking cost per unit as a function of annual volume. But this curve was very important because AG Toyota got a copy of the motor industry and apparently believed that this was hard data. And that's why Toyota produced, when they built a new factory, sized it for 200,000 units, because it would be, below that bend in the curve, which is interesting. Also because Honda, when they put their first factory here in the US, they didn't pay attention to that curve. They sized it for 50,000 units to start. And they added to it in 50,000 unit increments to that factory in Ohio in the United States. So, okay, so what you have with the Maxey-Silbertson curve is reflecting batch and queue production, where you have long setup times, long queue times, a lot of transportation time, and so forth. And so what did Frank Woolard at Morris Motors do, and what did Taiichi Ohno do? They said, well, if we can eliminate or reduce the setup time, the queue time, and the transportation time, what happens to that curve? It flattens out. Now, I added the lower curve. Did I get data to prove this? No, but I'm showing that there's a lower cost at lower volume, which is indeed what you find. What Ono said at the top right, it's much more economical to make each item one at a time. And that's indeed what they found in a flow production environment. When you drastically reduce setup time, queue time, and transportation time, when you produce things in a production cell and get the product, once you've made it, moving to the next step immediately, like the baton handoff that Ono talked about, to eliminate the queue time and transportation time. You flatten out that curve, and that's what roughly, at least in relation to the batch and queue curve, what it would look like. So this enables you to, and this was Toyota's dilemma, how do we, as a startup business back into 1930s and really in the post-World War II period, how do we compete with vertically integrated mass producers like Ford and General Motors, who in the US, but they were exporting what are called knockdown kits, basically disassembled cars to Japan for assembly in Japan. How are we going to compete on price with cars when we have much lower volumes, the capability to produce lower volumes? Well, we got to figure out a way to reduce setup time, queue time, and transportation time, et cetera. And so, so the scenario X and Y, if you're with us last time in the presentation, it's two ways of thinking about your problem. There's either one correct answer, 3 + 4 = 7. This is the one correct answer for production, which is batch and queue, which is what most people do. It's classical management. Whereas Woolard and Ono said, how do we, Ono in particular said, how do we compete? How do we produce at low cost and low volume? We don't know. We got to try it and see. The goal is number 7, low cost, low volume. They had to get quality later because they weren't too good at that early on. So we have to experiment. Blank plus blank equals our goal of low cost and low volume. We have, and mixed volume. Toyota was at first a truck producer and buses and so forth, and automotive was the dream that came true later. We have to experiment. How do we experiment? Kaizen. Try it and see. This is the thing that's so difficult to get across to business leaders, because they have made all these investments in big machinery and so forth, and want to produce big volume to absorb the overhead costs. And in America, this is why you see all these dollar stores, Dollar General. These are basically discount stores. Things are no longer $1 in those stores, like the name implies. They used to be. Everything was $1 or less because of overproduction. And if you closely follow Ono's writings, he's like, it's stupid to overproduce, because then you have to discount, which wipes away your profit, or you have to somehow otherwise liquidate what you've produced to these, not, you wouldn't, the cars don't go to dollar stores, but if you're making a can of corn or crayons or something else, it ends up in the dollar store. You've wiped out your profit. And obviously you have the carrying costs of the inventory. Yet this is just tradition. This is the preconception. The Maxey-Silberson curve is a preconception. You order more. And indeed, I was reading something about one of the Japanese language books that I was translating through Google Translate about, you buy, you get a discount as you buy more. And so everybody, in the procurement area, it's like, let's buy as much as possible, a little bit more than we need, maybe a lot more than we need, because we get a lower price. So, so anyway, so this is the nature, and then why you would want to go from batch production to flow production is to flatten out that curve so you can produce, not just one item, but a variety of items in low volumes and at lower costs. And of course, if you do Judoka with better quality, etc.
Bob, it's fun to see that the early materials about Toyota production system were all very much focused on just in time. And then as the time kept going on, people forgot about this subject basically. If you grab a Ono book, a mundane book, even just in time for today and tomorrow, the main topic is always just in time because Ono had this vision, this practical vision that all other wastes, all other excess of resources were born from the excess inventory, the excess production. And then Lean vanished with the concept of just in time. Maybe because it's the backbone of all cost reduction efforts, and it's very hard to convince people to go just in time. So let's do something else.
It's hard to convince them, and the people who promote lean, I think, maybe made a market-based decision. If there's no market for just in time, let's forget it and focus on the tools, et cetera. And they, may have made that decision. I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe they did that, but I guess it seems, it appears from what I understand is Ono took this idea as a challenge. And in the Toyota way, at least the original document 2001, one of the big things is challenge and take on challenges. And he took on the challenge of how do I make Kichiro Toyota's idea of just in time, and his father, oh, I forgot his name just all of a sudden. How do we take Jidoka? How do we take Jidoka and make that, how do we combine these two things and to make them reality? And they seem like two things that at first wouldn't go together to make sense to bring to reality. They, in some way, I think initially, I mean, my impression would have been it seems kind of separate. But anyway, they had the vision to see it as something to bring together to make a reality. So anyway, it's very interesting history on how all of this unfolded. Unfortunately, it's just not part of the lean construct. And again, the preconceptions stand in the way from moving this forward.
And yeah, we kind of can say that just in time requires Kaizen, and Lean doesn't know how to do Kaizen. So it's
No,
now is obvious.
no, it doesn't. I'll share, if you don't mind, a couple of other slides, just maybe for some humor. Bring in some humor here, because sometimes when the situation's bad, you have to laugh about it a little bit. So this is, oops, a little bit of a joke here. The Western interpretation of Toyota Production System is on the left-hand side. We just add these various pieces on as tools and stuff over time and make a very confusing situation. And this is my interpretation of how how lean came to us. It starts in the late 80s studying Toyota and Toyota Production System, but then as lean becomes a thing and starting in 1988, and then value stream map in 1999, and then followed by A3 reports and Gemba walks and so forth. All of these tools and methods come out in every few years in a piecemeal fashion to create this wacky lean house. And that was in fact the title of the I think the blog post and of the when I shared it on LinkedIn many years ago. This goes back, I don't know, 10 years at least. And then the house that Kaizen, the house that Kaizen built, the TPS house, which all of you are familiar with. And there's consistency today, of course, with Toyota and how they, go about their work to evolve Toyota Production System. So I'm going to make a kind of a crass and crude comparison here, just for fun and for laughs. Okay, so don't get too crazy about it. But you've seen on the left-hand side these facts about lean that some people on LinkedIn are offended with, and other people think, this can't be real. Is it a joke? But it's just the facts here. And then I relate it to American cheese, and I don't know if some of you from other countries, but American cheese is basically yellow oil. that pass congealed yellow oil that they refer to as American cheese, and so it's not something that's particularly tasty or certainly not healthy. Um, but I'm trying to draw a contrast here, obviously, between things here, and you know, TPS and just the studying this stuff and putting it into practice is really nutritious. It's mentally nutritious. It's very different than what it has been reduced to in the form of lean. So I hope you found that humorous. So we still have a long way to go. Keep trying, try different things. What is the goal? Number 7, to get a world that is more, I mean, Ono said, starting in 1978, I want to share this with everybody. I want to see TPS in other countries and other companies and so forth. And that dream has yet to be realized. We're still fighting the preconceptions associated with the batch and queue production and all the other things associated with classical management. So invite your comments, questions, participation, stories. Please share whatever you like.
I believe everybody's brains right now are burning with new ideas.
I hope so. Anybody? Anything? Catherine, you're not too shy.
No, I put some of my wandering thoughts and questions in the chat, but I'll
Oh,
I'll
I didn't.
ask
Oh,
one here is
yeah.
yeah, I run the risk of asking a question without an operational definition here about a healthy human environment. But in a healthy human environment, making lots of assumptions, do you suspect that Kaizen would occur organically?
Oh, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would. But that's the problem when you separate, people, the money aspect and people, and have. I mean, in classical management, the typical view of people, and Catherine, many of you or others of you know this too because you read my work. I mean, the typical view is that people are just instruments to get a job done and look forward to replacing them when the opportunity arrives with some kind of machinery or technology and so on. It doesn't view people as innovative and creative and so forth. And I've always been amazed at how wealthy CEOs will marvel at the craftsmanship of the motorcycle or whatever that they're buying that costs $80,000. And yet the craftsmanship that could be happening in the company, because there's people in the company who are just as skilled as making a fancy motorcycle or whatever as the person they're buying it from or whatever the case may be. They're like, let's lay these people off. They don't see the skill, they don't see the creativity, they don't see the ideas, the innovation, and it's how they lead and their preconception that these people are, just they're a necessary evil until I can think of a better way. And that's where you get the broad. And by the way, isn't there a huge dissatisfaction with, business, with CEOs, with the stresses at work and so forth these days? I mean, it's continuing to build, at least in the US. The dissatisfaction is continuing to build. Yes, and you had a comment about products going to the dollar stores are more comfortable, socially acceptable, and ego supportive, and more ego supportive than try it and see. And there's established paths for liquidation of this stuff. There's companies that specialize in being the intermediary or whatever to get it from, the producer's warehouse to the dollar store's warehouse. So why why get rid of that? It's incredible. Other thoughts?
I like when Suzumura-san says that when you are selling at a discount, it's like you have stolen a lifetime from
Yeah.
your workers because you made their work cheaper and not the correct price. That would be a little bit closer to be fair with human
Yeah, it's absolutely, yeah,
lifespan.
it's
It's
absolutely
really
true. You are stealing, yeah, from your workers when you do that. It's just, yeah, it's a difficult situation. And now, of course, AI comes along, and uh, you know, the window of opportunity. I mean, I still think humans are going to be involved in business for a long time to come. But I think the window of opportunity for putting forward TPS, there's a possibility, I don't know, low, medium, high, I have no idea, that might have passed. Possible.
I believe AI will bring up the surface the need for humanity back into work. So I believe we are kind of walking towards very hard times with that, but sometimes hard times moves people to radical innovation, and I still believe that we will have a lot of work because everything will push for the need to go back to being human, I believe.
Well, yeah, that's my hope too, and I think we can always think in terms of what's old is new again. And so 1978 was a long time ago when Ono said, I really want other companies to adopt this. And so we're coming upon 2028, and what is that? It's going to be 50. So you never know. What's old is new again. We'll see. But Catherine's doing a heck of a job trying to rehumanize business and others. And, we'll just keep trying, try different. Part of the key is to try different things. Um,
I think
and
more people are dissatisfied than say they are dissatisfied. And I think that
yeah,
includes executives, because as easy as it might be for us to see how dehumanizing, uh, which I think for the most part has been unintentionally dehumanizing, classically managed environments are, executives aren't always doing well themselves. You know,
yep.
I think they're feeling particularly dehumanized, but don't realize that they are in control, if they so choose, of changing that current status or experience for themselves. So,
Yeah, the thing that's hard to understand or to get across to these leaders is it's very much liberating when you set your people free to innovate and create and solve problems at the Gemba or in the office, whatever. And to be the facilitator of that rather than, the person in charge with the weight of the responsibility. I mean, some of that weight comes off your shoulders because now you've distributed among everybody.
yeah, do you think you have to set yourself free to be able to facilitate that environment, though, Bob?
As a what you have to do first.
Yeah.
No, I think it comes with getting leaders engaged in Kaizen and they start to see the potential. But again, the preconception is that that's for the little people to do, people at the bottom to do, not to me. My peer group CEOs don't get involved with Kaizen. And if I do, I've got some explaining to do, and they might ridicule me and look at me as an oddball and so forth. And my explaining is going to be it's better cost, quality, delivery, et cetera. And they're going to say, you want better costs, get rid of people. You want better delivery, you outsource it and put punitive fines on your suppliers if they don't deliver 100% on time. You know, they'll give you the classical management playbook to get to the same result. And so why are you wasting your time on the shop floor, work, elbow to elbow in jeans and a t-shirt with the operators? That's stupid. So anyway, again, if you were in their shoes, would you be any different? That's an important question. So anyway, I guess I would, Bruno, do you have a closing comment? And then I'll have a quick closing comment and that's it.
I'd like to thank you guys for being supportive to this work. It's the very first time we do something like that, and I believe it will become something that will happen a few times yet in the future with some distinctive subjects. It seems we have a lot of work to do, so I really appreciate your presence here and throughout the recordings for those who can see us live. So it's been very pleasurable for us to learn together, just like the old time sakes, huh?
Yep, yep.
As
What
a
do you mean?
group and
Yep, during COVID, you mean when this is all we
yeah,
did?
yeah, having nice discussions about everything.
All right. All right. Well, take care, everybody. And enjoy happy holidays. And we'll see you on New Year. And as Bruno says, we'll maybe figure out something else like this we can do later, maybe in the springtime. I know Bruno is very busy with a lot of stuff lately. So
Yeah.
take care. Thank you very much.
Bye,
Bye
folks.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.